Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Victor, who's an intermediate photographer from India. Victor says this is a man walking on a vast plateau at a hill station near Mumbai, India. He says he loved the juxtaposition of a lone human figure in front of the hugeness of these plains and this plateau. Shot this with an Olympus point and shoot with a built-in 38 to 380 millimeter lens, and the exposure information is ISO 50, f8, and 1/800th of a second. Under questions and comments, Victor had a couple of questions. He had a question about this bright area in the shot, and also wondered if there's any way to make the negative space at the bottom more attractive. We just wanted to mention a quick technical thing. Love the working aperture here, f8. In so many situations with so many different lenses, f8 will be a really nice compromise in terms of stopping down to get some depth of field, but not stopping down so far to smaller apertures where we will start to lose overall image quality to diffraction. I love this image. To me, it has a huge psychological impact. One of the things I love about it is the simplicity of it. The negative space here, the plateau, and the man are almost in a silhouette. If we look at the histogram, we can see there's probably some information there that we could bring out. Here are the pixels that represent the bottom part of the image, negative space of the plateau and the man, and then here are all the sky pixels. I just love the fact that the man and the plateau are in silhouette. So much of the time in storytelling, it's the part that we leave to the viewer's imagination that ends up having a huge psychological impact. And no matter whether you underexpose in the camera, which sometimes, depending on what you're underexposing in the scene, can be a little bit iffy, because if we changed our mind, and this is the way this came out of the camera, we wanted to get detail in these areas, it'd be very difficult to brighten them up very much at all without running out of information and getting noise and posterization. But I just encourage you to constantly be looking at scenes and previewing what they would look like if they were dramatically underexposed. It's such a simple camera control, and we get so caught up now that we have the histogram and getting detail that we forget that if we go beyond detail, that it's one of the easiest ways to abstract a scene. And if the direction that we go in is making things darker than they actually are, that can be a very, very powerful way to tell a story. One of the things that I've encouraged you to do if you follow the Daily Critique is when you look at images, to go into the adjustment panel, choose curves, and just go to the middle and very quickly do a very dramatic darkening and lightening. And very simple but very powerful tool at the level of capture. And once we are inside of Photoshop, there's a lot of other things that I really love about this image. One of the things that I love is the rhythm between all these diagonals of the beams of light cutting through the clouds in this particular moment, with the silhouette of the man and the very powerful diagonals of the legs and of the arm. I also absolutely enjoy the relationship, this dynamic between the center of energy of the clouds and the man. That in itself, that implied energy, moves on a diagonal that is rhythmic with the actual diagonal lines in the shot. Something else to me that's simple, but it's so beautiful in this image, is how the arc of this line flattens out here even a little bit more and then completely settles out into almost a flat line. I just love that transition. Very simple and very beautiful. The other thing that's fascinating to me is that because this is a human figure in a silhouette, and this person doesn't have hair that makes a real dramatic shape or anything, just the simple shape of the top of the head does a beautiful job of rhyming the tops of the clouds. And that's also true about this information that breaks up the line of the negative space. I love this little bit of texture, just adding another layer of information, and the implied energy of those little bushes or grasses again mimics the clouds. Another takeaway from the video potentially today is the idea of direction of movement and the kind of psychological impact that that can have. This is a classic image where, at least to my eye, and the psychological feeling I get is if we flip this horizontal, totally different feeling that I get from looking at this picture. So let's just talk about a couple of reasons that might be contributing to that. From a cinematic standpoint, we've been trained now for, I don't know, somewhere close to 100 years, that good guys come in from the left and move to the right, and bad guys enter from the right and move to the left. In the West, we're trained to read, and so we like to start at the top right and move down, top left, excuse me, and move down to the bottom right. And in this orientation, everything about all the subjects is moving in a natural direction. The person's implied movement is left to right. The movement in terms of these ideas I've already mentioned happens on a diagonal that goes from top left to bottom right. Even the slope of this line, it's so subtle, but it's still ever so slightly moving downhill, and it's so much easier for us to move downhill like this than it is to be forced to start on the left and then go up on a line. And when we flip this image, you really get a sense of those things. I'm not saying this is a bad orientation, but I'm saying that this orientation for most people will create more of a sense of tension. There's not as much of a sense of closure or unity, or it feels like it's a natural movement. And this, to me, feels more finished. And these cues that we're getting in terms of implied direction have a big part to do with that. You might think, well, what does it matter? It matters. It's huge. You get to choose as the photographer where you place people in the frame. Even if you're not talking to somebody and they're in a shot, you can decide whether you pan to the left or right, or at the moment that you take the picture. If you're shooting a type portrait, one of the things that I encourage people to do all the time, if you don't have a real strong sense of visual sea level in the shot, is to start to rotate the camera and create your own angles of movement. And to always do that as an exercise, and to start to see how that makes you feel psychologically different as the viewer. You have the potential to change that by getting away from the habit of holding your camera at sea level, right at chest level. And so could be a very powerful potential takeaway from the video today. When it comes to the questions that Victor had, this bright area up here, I love it. You know, I'm not interested, I'm not always interested in keeping detail everywhere. I love the fact that this goes potentially to a white point, and that we have everything from a white point to a black point. And I love the flow of luminosity, bright and then dark and then very brooding and dark, and it's on and on and on, and the way that creates a feeling of depth in the top part of the image. And to me, the negative space down here is totally fascinating, mainly because of this little bit of texture and the feeling of the slope. And I like all this negative space down here. I think this image is so powerful psychologically that I like the idea of the person being grounded. I think it has a powerful effect because, you know, one of the things that could happen in this image is it could remind people that have a certain belief system that we're all alone. And really, ultimately, no matter what you believe, the reality is that the beliefs that we have about our relationship to other people, to wherever we might be at any given time, or the whole universe, they're stories that we make up in our mind, because ultimately we don't really know. So in some respects, we could say that we're all alone. Something about this negative space, to me, sort of helps to ground the person. But I just love the psychological impact of this story that kind of brings up that archetype that I think in a lot of respects is a big fear that we have, just sort of this idea that we are sort of trekking and journeying through the experience alone. And I think the silhouette really contributes to the power of that part of the story. This could have been a photo of the week. I just absolutely love the psychological impact and power of this beautiful image that Victor submitted. I want to say a big thank you to him. I want to say a huge thank you to you for being here on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique. Hope to see you again real soon.